Edward I, often remembered by the powerful nickname Longshanks because he was 6 feet 2, really tall for his time, and Hammer of the Scots, was one of the most powerful yet puzzling kings in English history. From a young age, Edward had to be brave and clever. As a prince, he helped his father, King Henry, fight against rebel barons who threatened the kingdom. He even went on a crusade to distant lands, learning how to lead soldiers and never give up. These early battles shaped Edward into a tough and determined leader. In 1274, Edward became King of England. Edward believed a king should be powerful and feared. He was also proud. He felt it was his duty to bring order to all the lands around him. And soon he set his sights on the independent nations of Wales and Scotland, determined to get them under his rule. In 1277, Edward turned his attention to Wales, the land of mountains to the west. Wales was ruled by Prince Griffith, who refused to bow to the English king. When Griffith refused to accept Edward as his overlord, Edward raised a great army and invaded. Outnumbered and facing defeat, Griffith surrendered without a major battle and lost much of his power. But the peace did not last. In 1282, Griffith and his brother Dafydd rebelled, hoping to drive out the English, but Edward responded swiftly and fiercely. The Welsh fought bravely in their rugged hills, but Edward's forces were stronger. Griffith was killed in an ambush, and by 1283, Edward's men captured Dafydd. Edward had Dafydd executed as a traitor. With both Welsh leaders now gone, Wales had lost its independence after centuries of self-rule. Edward was determined to secure his new conquest. To control Wales, he built a ring of mighty castles across the land, at Carnarvon, Conway, Harlech and other sites. Massive stone fortresses rose, their thick walls and tall towers filled with English soldiers kept watch over the Welsh people. These castles sent a clear message: Edward was here to stay. In 1284, he officially annexed Wales to England. English laws and officials now ruled in Wales. To further mark his victory, Edward gave his own son the title Prince of Wales. It started a tradition that the heir to the English throne would also be called the Prince of Wales. The Welsh had to accept a new reality. Their country was now under King Edward's crown. Edward's conquest of Wales was complete. He had proven himself a bold and unyielding ruler. But even as Wales bowed to him, a greater challenge was brewing in the north. Edward's toughest test was about to begin in Scotland. When Scotland's King Alexander III died in 1286 without an apparent heir, the Scottish lords were unsure who should rule. They asked King Edward to help decide, and Edward agreed on one condition: that he be recognised as Scotland's overlord, supreme ruler. With little choice, the Scots reluctantly accepted. Edward chose a noble named John Balliol to be the new King of Scotland in 1292, and expecting Balliol to obey him, but Edward pushed too hard, treating King John like a puppet. He demanded Scottish taxes, troops and control over Scottish laws, but the proud Scots resented this interference. Soon King John and his advisors rebelled against Edward's commands and allied with France, England's enemy. Edward was enraged by this defiance, and in 1296 he invaded Scotland with a great army to crush the resistance. Edward's campaign of 1296 was swift and brutal. His forces stormed the border town of Berwick-upon-Tweed, captured it after a bloody siege. It's said that thousands of townspeople were killed when Edward's men poured in, giving a harsh warning to the rest of Scotland. At the Battle of Dunbar, Edward's army defeated the Scottish forces in a one-sided fight. Castles and towns fell one by one. Edward even seized the sacred stone of Scone, on which Scottish kings were crowned, and sent it to England as a trophy. He forced King John Balliol to abdicate, give up his throne, and then imprisoned him. By the end of 1296, Edward believed that Scotland was conquered and under his control, just as Wales was. but the Scots had not given up. In 1297, resistance flared again, led by a fiery warrior named William Wallace. Wallace, though not a high-born noble, inspired ordinary Scots to fight for their freedom. He and his followers attacked English garrisons and ambushed enemy troops. In September 1297, Wallace achieved a stunning victory at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. Using clever tactics, the Scots trapped and destroyed a large English force as it tried to cross a narrow bridge over a river. Any English soldiers drowned or were cut down, and this shocking defeat of Edward's forces made the mighty king furious and uneasy. For the first time, one of his armies had been beaten by rebels. Edward, upon hearing of the disaster at Stirling, vowed to crush the Scottish uprising himself. He gathered a vast army and personally led it north in 1298. The two sides met at the Battle of Falkirk. There, Edward showed no mercy. Wallace's men formed circles of spearmen, hoping to hold off Edward's armoured knights. But Edward had brought hundreds of archers with powerful longbows, and arrows rained down on the Scottish spearmen, breaking their defences. Then Edward's cavalry charged and the Scots were utterly defeated. Wallace barely escaped with his life. Scotland's open resistance was shattered that day, and Wallace went into hiding after the battle. For a few years after Falkirk, Edward seemed to have Scotland in his iron grip. By 1304, most Scottish nobles had sworn loyalty to him again, and in 1305, William Wallace was captured and handed over to the English. Edward had Wallace executed for treason in a very cruel way and to terrify anyone still resisting. But it seems Scotland was finally subdued. However, in 1306, Robert the Bruce, a Scottish noble with his own claim to the throne, took up the fight. Robert crowned himself King of Scots and rallied the people to his cause. Edward, now an aging and ill man, refused to admit defeat. He mustered his army one more time to invade Scotland, but on the way north, disease caught up with him. In July 1307, King Edward I died before he could reach Bruce. Legend says Edward asked his son to carry his bones into battle so he could continue fighting even after death. We don't know if that last request is true, but it shows how fierce and determined Edward was. Edward's final wish to subdue Scotland completely went unfulfilled. His war against the Scots continued under his son's reign, and Robert the Bruce would soon win Scottish independence. King Edward I left a deep mark on British history. First, he brought Wales under English rule, a change that lasted for centuries. The Welsh princes were gone, replaced by English laws and officials. Even today, the heir of the British throne is called the Prince of Wales. That tradition began with Edward's son. The mighty castles Edward built in Wales still stand as silent witnesses to his conquest. These stone giants changed the Welsh landscape and remind everyone of the time when Wales came under English rule. Edward's wars in Scotland also shaped the future of the British Isles. He earned the nickname Hammer of the Scots for his harsh campaign to break Scottish resistance. Though he inflicted great suffering and tried to dominate Scotland, he ultimately failed to subdue it completely. Instead, his aggression fueled Scottish determination. Heroes like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce became legends, inspiring the Scots to fight on and preserve their independence. The bitter conflicts between Edward and the Scots left a legacy of pride and defiance in Scotland. Beyond his wars, Edward's life had many other events, but it is his conquests that people remember most. Edward I's life was full of drama, triumphs, failures, bravery and cruelty. By conquering Wales and fiercely battling Scotland, he changed the map of Britain, set the stage for future nations. His legacy lives on in castles he built, in the legends of his foes, and in the very shape of Great Britain today. Edward's story matters because it shows how one determined ruler's choices can alter the course of history, with effects that last for centuries.